"Excuse me, sweetheart, but I think you're confused. The economy section is back past the curtain." The voice was oily, dripping with a condescension that seemed to lower the temperature in the first-class cabin. Kristen Paul didn't immediately look up from her book. She had just settled into seat 3A, enjoying the rare moment of stillness before the chaos of a cross-country flight. She adjusted the hem of her royal blue sleeveless top, her long blonde hair cascading over her left shoulder, and slowly turned her gaze toward the aisle. A man in a bespoke charcoal suit loomed over her. He was holding a tumbler of pre-departure scotch in one hand and a boarding pass in the other, tapping it impatiently against his thigh. He had the flushed, polished look of a man who was used to shouting at subordinates and having them thank him for it. "I believe I am in the correct seat," Kristen said. Her voice was low, calm, and possessed a texture that didn't match her youthful appearance. She kept her eyes level with his belt buckle for a moment before raising them to meet his face. It was a tactic she had learned a lifetime ago. Neutrality was often more unsettling than aggression. The man whose expensive leather carry-on was currently blocking the aisle for everyone else let out a sharp, incredulous huff. He looked around the cabin, seeking an audience for his indignation. "Did you hear that?" he asked the empty air, though his eyes were fixed on a businessman in 3B who was desperately trying to disappear into his tablet. I tried to be polite. "Listen, honey, I don't know who you smiled at to get past the gate agent, or if you're just hoping no one notices you snuck up here, but this is first class. This is for people who pay for it." Kristen sighed, a micro-expression of exhaustion that she quickly masked. She reached into the seat pocket, retrieved her boarding pass, and held it up without a word. It clearly read 3A. The man snatched it from her hand. He stared at it, his brow furrowing as if he were trying to decipher a foreign code. Then he scoffed, tossing it back onto her lap. "System error," he declared, waving his hand dismissively. "Look, I'm a Platinum Key member. I fly this route weekly. Seat 3A is my seat. It's always my seat. The app probably glitched because you were hovering around the upgrade list. Now be a good girl and head back to row 30 before I have to call someone." The cabin had gone silent. The soft jazz playing over the speakers seemed deafeningly loud in the vacuum of tension. Kristen picked up her boarding pass, smoothed out the crinkle he had put in it, and placed it back in the pocket. She didn't move. "I suggest you find your assigned seat, sir," she said, her voice dropping an octave, hardening just enough to signal a warning to anyone with the instincts to hear it. The man's face turned a shade of crimson that clashed with his tie. He slammed his hand against the overhead bin, causing a woman in row 4 to jump. "Stewardess," he bellowed. A flight attendant hurried down the aisle, her smile tight and practiced, her eyes darting between the standing man and the seated woman. She was middle-aged, wearing the uniform with a tired sort of pride, but her posture suggested she was already dreading this interaction. Her name tag read Nancy. "Mr. Sterling, is there a problem?" Nancy asked, her voice soothing, clearly recognizing the man. "There is a massive problem, Nancy," Sterling spat, gesturing wildly at Kristen. "This person is in my seat, and she refuses to move. I want her removed. Now." Nancy turned to Kristen. The flight attendant's gaze swept over her. The long blonde hair, the athletic build, the sleeveless royal blue top that looked more like high-end casual wear than business attire. She took in Kristen's youth and the absence of a wedding ring. The calculation was visible in Nancy's eyes. Young, attractive woman in first class versus a high-status, frequent-flying male business customer. "Ma'am," Nancy said, her tone shifting from professional to patronizingly sweet. "May I see your boarding pass, please?" Kristen handed it over again. Nancy studied it, frowned, and tapped her fingernail against the paper. "Well, it does say 3A, Nancy murmured, mostly to herself. Then she looked up, her smile straining. "Ma'am, are you a dependent? Is your husband or father perhaps on the flight? Sometimes the system splits reservations and upgrades the wrong party." Kristen sat very still. The question was innocent enough on the surface, but the implication was a jagged blade. "You couldn't possibly be here on your own merit." "I am not a dependent," Kristen said, enunciating each syllable with surgical precision. "I purchased the ticket." Mr. Sterling groaned, checking his Rolex. "Nancy, we are 10 minutes from pushback. I have a conference call the second we land. I need the workspace. This is ridiculous. She's obviously confused or lying. Just move her to coach so we can get in the air. You can give her a voucher for a free drink or something." Nancy looked at Sterling, then back at Kristen. The pressure of the departure schedule and the weight of Sterling's status tipped the scales. "Ma'am, look," Nancy said, stepping closer, invading Kristen's personal space. "We have a very full flight today. Obviously, there's been some sort of mix-up with the booking priorities. Mr. Sterling is one of our most valued customers. I'm going to have to ask you to gather your things. I can find you a seat in the main cabin, and we can sort out the refund difference later at the desk." "No," Kristen said. "Excuse me." Nancy blinked. "No," Kristen repeated. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't gesture. She simply existed in the space she had claimed, an immovable object against their irresistible force of entitlement. "I paid for this seat. I am sitting in this seat. If this gentleman has a grievance with the airline's booking algorithm, he can take it up with customer service after we land. But I am not moving." Sterling let out a harsh laugh. "Oh, you're not moving. You think you can just hijack a seat because you feel entitled? Do you know who I am? Do you have any idea the kind of taxes I pay that probably fund whatever government handout bought you that ticket?" He reached down, grabbing the strap of Kristen's backpack, which was tucked near her feet. "I'm not playing games with you, sweetheart. Get up, or I'm dragging you up." At the moment his hand touched her property, the air in the cabin changed. It wasn't a sound, but a shift in pressure. Kristen moved. It was a subtle shift, a rotation of her torso, her right hand coming up not to strike but to intercept. She didn't touch him, but her posture went from relaxed passenger to coiled spring in a fraction of a second. Her blue top shifted with the movement, the fabric pulling tight across her back. For a split second, the smell of expensive cologne and stale cabin air vanished for Kristen. Instead, she smelled burning diesel and copper. She felt the grit of sand between her teeth. The roar of the jet engines outside the window was replaced by the rhythmic thumping of rotors, the chaotic shouting in Pashto, the heavy, suffocating weight of body armor. She saw the flash of a breach, the dust settling in a moonlit courtyard, the faces of men who looked at her not with condescension, but with the desperate, wild eyes of brothers relying on her to clear the fatal funnel. She remembered the weight of the ruck, the searing heat of the valley, and the cold reality that status back home meant nothing when the tracers were flying. In that world, you held your ground or you died. You didn't give up your position because someone louder told you to move. The memory, a flash echo of a life she kept compartmentalized, lasted only a heartbeat. It sharpened her focus. She looked at Sterling's hand on her bag, then up at his face. Her eyes were terrifyingly empty of fear. "Remove your hand," she said. It wasn't a request. It was a terminal instruction. Sterling hesitated, unnerved by the sudden intensity coming from the woman he had dismissed as decoration. But his ego was too committed to back down, or what? "You're going to scratch me. Nancy, call the captain. Get security. I want this unruly passenger off the plane immediately. She's threatening me." Nancy, looking flustered and out of her depth, grabbed the interphone handset. "Captain, we have a disturbance in first class. A passenger is refusing to vacate a duplicate seat assignment and is becoming aggressive with a platinum member." The cabin was buzzing now. Whispers of "Can you believe her?" and "Just move, lady," floated from the rows behind. A few people were filming with their phones, hungry for viral content. Kristen sat back, releasing the tension in her shoulders but keeping her eyes locked on Sterling. She knew the procedure. She knew what was coming, and she knew she wasn't wrong. Moments later, the cockpit door unlatched. The pilot emerged. Captain Mike Hayes was a man carved from granite, with silver hair cut close, and the weary, patient eyes of a man who had flown everything from crop dusters to fighter jets. He adjusted his cap, his eyes scanning the scene. The red-faced Sterling, the frazzled Nancy, and the blonde woman in 3A who sat with the stillness of a statue. "What is going on here?" Hayes asked, his voice a deep rumble that cut through the chatter. "Captain, thank God," Sterling said, stepping forward and pointing an accusatory finger at Kristen. "This woman stole my seat. Nancy told her to move. She refused. Then she threatened me when I tried to help her move her bag. She's unstable. I want her off." Hayes looked at Nancy. "Is this true?" Nancy nodded vigorously. "She's refusing to cooperate, Captain. And Mr. Sterling is a platinum key holder. The manifest shows." Hayes held up a hand, silencing her. He turned his eyes to Kristen. He took a step closer, his expression stern. He was assessing the threat. He saw a young woman in a royal blue top. She was leaning forward slightly now, elbows on her knees, head bowed as if gathering patience. "Ma'am," Hayes started, his tone firm. "On my aircraft we follow instructions. If the flight attendant asks you to." Kristen looked up. As she did, she rotated her shoulders back to address the captain fully. The movement caused the strap of her royal blue top to slide slightly, and because she was leaning forward, the fabric across her upper back stretched tight against her skin. The morning sun streaming through the open cabin door hit her back. Captain Hayes stopped mid-sentence. His eyes had drifted from her face to her shoulder, and then locked onto the skin exposed by the cut of her shirt near the right shoulder blade. There, inked in dark, precise lines against her skin, was a tattoo. It wasn't a butterfly, or a flower, or a meaningless tribal design. It was an anchor, an eagle, a trident, and a flintlock pistol. The design was specific. It was intimate. It was the mark of the teams, but it wasn't just the trident. Below it was a small, jagged text that Hayes recognized instantly, a unit designation that didn't exist on official org charts anymore. It was a memorial ink, the kind you only got if you were there when the towers fell, or when the valley burned. Hayes froze. The air left his lungs. He looked at the tattoo, then back at Kristen's face. He really looked at her this time. He saw the scar running along her hairline that the makeup didn't quite hide. He saw the way her hands were resting on her knees, relaxed but ready. He saw the calluses. He saw the 1,000-yard stare that she had politely shuttered behind civilian etiquette. He knew that tattoo. He knew the unit, and he knew that women weren't supposed to have it unless they had earned it in the deep, dark corners of the war that the news never covered. The cultural support teams, the handlers, the quiet professionals who walked into rooms where men couldn't go and did things the history books would gloss over. But the specific modification to the design, the golden star woven into the anchor, meant something else. It meant she was a recipient of the Silver Star or higher, or she was the sole survivor of a unit that had been wiped out. The silence stretched out, agonizingly long. Sterling mistook the captain's silence for agreement. See? Even the captain knows you're a fraud. Come on, let's go. Police are on the way. Captain Hayes didn't blink. He slowly raised his hand, not to grab Kristen but to silence Sterling. The gesture was sharp, commanding, and final. Quiet, Hayes ordered. His voice wasn't a rumble anymore. It was the crack of a whip. Sterling's mouth snapped shut. Stunned, Captain Hayes looked at Kristen. He stood up straighter, his shoulders squaring. The fatigue vanished from his face, replaced by a rigid, deferential discipline. "What is your name, ma'am?" Hayes asked softly. "Kristen Paul," she answered. Captain Hayes swallowed hard. He knew the name. Everyone in the community knew the name Paul. It was the name attached to the extraction of the ambassador in 19... Captain Hayes turned to Nancy. "Nancy, hand me the manifest." "But Captain, Mr. Sterling is..." "The manifest, Nancy. Now." She handed him the tablet. He scrolled, ignoring the flashing VIP tag next to Sterling's name. He found 3A, Kristen Paul. No VIP tag, no miles, just a government rate code. Code V1. Hayes looked at the code. He tapped it. It expanded. Department of Defense. Priority Level 1. Must ride. Medal of Honor recipient. Travel authorization. Hayes felt the blood drain from his face. He looked at Sterling, who was now checking his watch again, oblivious to the precipice he was standing on. "You want to kick her off?" Hayes asked Sterling, his voice dangerously quiet. "She's a nuisance," Sterling said. "She's probably some enlisted spouse trying to act important." Captain Hayes turned fully towards Sterling. The look on his face was one of profound disgust. "This woman," Hayes said, his voice rising so the entire first-class cabin could hear, "is not a spouse. She is not a nuisance. And she is certainly not getting off this plane unless she decides she doesn't want to breathe the same air as you." Sterling bristled. "Now see here. I know the CEO of this airline. I don't care if you know the President of the United States." Hayes cut him off. "You are harassing a passenger who has done more for your freedom to be a pompous ass than you could achieve in 10 lifetimes. Hayes pulled his radio from his belt. He keyed the mic. "Tower, this is American Flight 492 at Gate C4. We have a security incident. I need airport police, and I need the JSOC liaison officer from the nearby base immediately." Sterling smirked. "Finally, get her out of here." "I'm not calling them for her," Hayes said, staring Sterling dead in the eye. "I'm calling them for you." The next 10 minutes were a blur of confusion for the passengers, but a spectacle of justice for those watching closely. The flashing lights outside didn't just signal airport security. 2 black SUVs pulled up onto the tarmac alongside the jet bridge, a breach of protocol that only happened for heads of state or the highest level of military urgency. Sterling was still standing in the aisle, confident that the cavalry was coming to remove the blonde girl. He was already composing the complaint email in his head. The cabin door flew open, but it wasn't the TSA or the local beat cops who stepped on first. It was a Navy Rear Admiral, accompanied by 2 MPs and a woman in a sharp gray suit who radiated authority. The Admiral was in his service khakis, ribbons stacked to his shoulder. He looked furious. "Where is she?" the Admiral demanded, his voice booming. Captain Hayes stepped aside, gesturing to seat 3A. The Admiral marched down the aisle. Sterling stepped forward, a smug smile on his face. "Admiral, thank you for coming. This woman has been—" The Admiral didn't even look at him. He shouldered Sterling aside with enough force to knock the man back into seat 3B. The Admiral stopped in front of Kristen. The entire cabin held its breath. Kristen stood up slowly. She smoothed her blue top. She looked at the Admiral, and for the first time a small, weary smile touched her lips. "Hello, sir," she said. The Admiral snapped a salute so crisp it seemed to cut the air. He held it. It was a salute of absolute, unwavering respect. A salute from a superior officer to a subordinate. No, this was a salute to a legend. "Chief Paul," the Admiral said, dropping his hand only after she returned the gesture. "I was told there was an issue with your transport." "Just a misunderstanding, Admiral," Kristen said softly. "This gentleman thought I was in the wrong seat." The Admiral turned slowly to face Sterling. Sterling was pale now. He was looking from the Admiral to the captain to the blonde woman he had tried to bully. He saw the realization dawning on the faces of the other passengers. "A misunderstanding," the Admiral repeated. He looked at Sterling as if he were a stain on the upholstery. "You tried to evict Chief Petty Officer Kristen Paul from her seat?" Sterling stammered. I didn't know. She didn't look like— I mean, she's a woman, and she's a woman," the Admiral interrupted, his voice like grinding stones. "She is a senior chief special warfare operator. She is the first woman to complete the full pipeline and operate with the development group. She has 4 Purple Hearts. She pulled 3 men out of a burning helicopter in the Petch Valley while taking machine gun fire to her back, which is where she got the scars you were so quick to judge." The Admiral leaned in close to Sterling. "She is flying to Washington to have the president hang a medal around her neck that you only see in movies. And you wanted to move her to coach so you could have more room for your laptop?" The silence in the cabin was absolute. The woman in 4A audibly gasped. Sterling looked like he wanted to vomit. I'm sorry," he whispered. "I didn't know." "Ignorance is not an excuse for disrespect," Captain Hayes interjected from the cockpit door. He looked at Nancy. "And you're supposed to ensure the safety and dignity of our passengers, not profile them." Nancy was trembling. "I followed the protocol for conflict resolution, Captain." "You followed the protocol for appeasing a bully," Hayes corrected her. The Admiral turned back to Kristen. "Chief, we can arrange private transport. You don't have to fly with these civilians." Kristen looked at Sterling, who was now shrinking into the seat he had previously claimed was his birthright. She looked at Nancy, who was on the verge of tears. Then she looked around the cabin at the other passengers who were looking at her with a mix of awe and shame. "No, sir," Kristen said. "I'm fine here. I just want to get home." "But," she paused, looking at Sterling. "I think this gentleman was just leaving." The Admiral nodded to the MPs. "Escort Mr. Sterling off the aircraft. He can discuss his status with the federal air marshals regarding interference with a flight crew in a protected military transport." "But," Sterling started. "Now," the Admiral barked. Sterling gathered his bag, his face burning with a humiliation deeper than anything he had ever inflicted on a waiter or a clerk. He was marched off the plane past the rows of silent passengers. As he passed row 10, someone started clapping, then another. Soon the entire plane was applauding, not for the scene but for the woman standing quietly in row 3. The Admiral shook Kristen's hand one last time. "We'll see you in D.C., Chief." As the entourage left and the door closed, Captain Hayes picked up the interphone PA. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain speaking. I want to apologize for the delay. We had some cargo that needed to be offloaded. We're going to get you to D.C. as fast as possible. And to the passenger in 3A, it is an honor to have you aboard. Drinks are on the house for everyone in first class today, except for the empty seat in 3B. Kristen sat back down. She didn't gloat. She didn't pull out her phone to tweet about it. She simply opened her book. As the plane taxied, she closed her eyes for a second. The vibration of the wheels on the tarmac brought back the flash echo again. The origin story. It wasn't a ceremony that earned her the tattoo. It was a cave complex in northern Syria. Total darkness. Her team had been ambushed. Her team leader, a giant of a man named Miller, had taken a round to the femoral. The exit was blocked. The air was filled with dust and screams. Kristen had been the smallest, the only one who could fit through the collapsed vent shaft to flank the enemy position. She remembered crawling through the jagged rock, the stone tearing her uniform, tearing her skin. She remembered the terror, not for herself but that she wouldn't be fast enough to save Miller. She remembered dropping into the enemy chamber, her silenced pistol coughing 3 times. She remembered dragging Miller, a man twice her weight, 300 meters to the extract point, while her back burned from the shrapnel of a grenade. Miller had survived. He was the one who designed the tattoo. He drew it on a napkin in the hospital in Germany. The trident for the brotherhood, the pistol for the save, the anchor because she was the only thing that held them to the earth when the world went to hell. She opened her eyes. The plane was lifting off, the G-force pressing her into the seat. Nancy appeared at her elbow. She was holding a glass of champagne, her hand shaking slightly. Miss Paul, Chief, I am so incredibly sorry. I made assumptions I shouldn't have. I was tired, and I let him push me. It won't happen again. Kristen looked at the woman. She saw the genuine contrition. She saw a woman who was just trying to survive her job, who had made a mistake. Kristen took the champagne. She didn't smile, but her eyes softened. Standards matter, Nancy, Kristen said quietly. It doesn't matter who the person is or what suit they're wearing. The rules apply to everyone. Don't let the loud ones drown out the right ones. I won't, Nancy whispered. Thank you. Kristen turned to the window, watching the ground fall away. She touched the spot on her shoulder where the ink lived under the blue fabric. She wasn't a hero because she had a tattoo. She was a hero because she knew that the real battles weren't fought for first-class upgrades or status. They were fought for the person beside you. And sometimes the biggest victories were just holding your ground when everyone told you to move. The flight to DC was smooth. When they landed, Kristen waited for everyone else to deplane. She didn't want the attention. She grabbed her backpack, thanked Captain Hayes with a nod as she passed the cockpit, and walked into the terminal. She blended into the crowd instantly. The royal blue top disappeared into the sea of travelers. The long blonde hair was just another hairstyle in a busy airport. No one looked twice at her. No one knew that the woman walking toward the baggage claim carried the weight of history on her back, and that was exactly how she liked it. If you enjoyed this story of unlooked-for valor and justice, please like, share, and subscribe to She Chose Valor. Help us honor the women who serve, the stories you haven't heard, and the heroes walking among us.